It's time to eat.
What are you hungry for?
Sit down and get ready to consume an abundance of fantasy football knowledge from Ross Tucker and John Daigle.
Feed me now. I'm starving.
On the Fantasy Feast Eatin' podcast.
Yeah, let's eat, baby. It is the Fantasy Feast Eatin' podcast presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. I'm Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman. Most of you know that. 5 teams, 7 years. Long time ago. Thank goodness, though, because it enabled me to get all these gigs, right? Calling NFL and college games for CBS on TV or NFL games on the radio for Westwood One. I do the Eagles preseason, which, gosh, that'll be here before you know it. It's kind of crazy how fast it comes back around. And I have a bunch of podcasts. So yesterday we had part 2 of Warren Sharp breaking down the NFL schedule, which, you know, we primarily talked about from a competitive fairness standpoint and from a betting standpoint. But just thinking about it now, I think some of those rest disparity, short weeks, I think that has an impact on fantasy football as well, actually. So check out Warren Sharp on Even Money the last couple of weeks. We keep trucking along with Emory Hunt on the college draft with every single draft choice. So especially those of you that are in the dynasty or rookie drafts or whatever, we are literally talking about every single draft choice and the college undrafted free agents that Emory really likes. And of course, the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Today, Michael Hoyt, the edge rusher that the Bills gave a pretty nice contract to this offseason. He's on the show. Awesome guy. Thank goodness that there's still some guys out there like that took total personal responsibility and accountability for his PED suspension. Tomorrow, we'll have Greg Cosell on the Ross Tucker Podcast. Probably end up putting that on this feed as well, because Greg will be talking about the scheme fits for the rookie tight end. So Colston Loveland, Tyler Warren, Mason Taylor, Arroyo, all those guys. We'll be all over that on tomorrow's Ross Tucker Football Podcast. You can check me out on social media at Ross Tucker NFL. Check us out at Ross Tucker Pod. That's the network. Love those of you that check us out on YouTube, youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. Please, please, please rate and review the show. You can subscribe, you can share, and you can certainly follow my guy John Daigle on social media at NotJDaigle. So he comes to us from the folks at EstablishTheRun.com. They got a great thing going there. It is a perfect and very opportune time to go to EstablishTheRun.com and use that code FEAST so that you get 20% off. So much information there, very cost effective. Great way to make sure you are properly informed to win your league, no matter what kind of league it is, which is especially relevant today, because today, I think we do this pretty much every year. It is a best ball preview, best ball primer. John, I don't even know if you know this, but best ball is my favorite kind of fantasy football. Love playing best ball at DraftKings. Love the code Ross. And we thought it'd be kind of a good idea to kind of more or less give people a heads up as to the best way to play best ball anywhere, and in particular at DraftKings.
And we have our special best ball package going on right now for sale using that promo code FEAST at EstablishTheRun.com. And given that that's what time of the year it is for most people to draft, and then for those that don't know what best ball is, it's not just drafting your team, but then you're done. You don't even have to set it and forget it. Once you draft, then automatically the highest scoring players for each week start that week for your team. There is strategy, though. Lots of strategy involved, especially if you're playing in bigger tournaments on DraftKings that we'll discuss today.
Love it, love it, love it. So I think it's the best way to play best ball, to play fantasy, but I guess on some level, it feels like, John, that it's still not quite as popular as season long, probably just because season long's been around for so long. Season long is what people know so well.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I completely agree. Not only that, but given the way sports in general are segmented across the year, now is the time of the year for baseball and then, of course, the basketball playoffs. Everyone just tends to take a break. Like, some people don't want football year round, and that's completely okay. But for those that do, best ball does give you an outlet to draft quite literally all year long. And so if you're one of those individuals, then yes, DraftKings has best ball going right now.
All right, so let's just start with an overview. I mean, you kind of talked about, what people like me like about it, probably because during the season, I just have too much stuff going on to have to put people in and out of my lineup, know who's injured, know who's inactive, who's not. The roster management part of it is not fun for me for fantasy football. The draft is fun, right? The best ball drafts, any draft. But that's really what best ball is. It's the best ball draft. So an overview, John, of sort of the ideal structure, you would say, for most people when it comes to best ball.
For DraftKings in particular, the structure is 20 rounds, and then you're not just drafting as you would a season-long team. Since there is a lot of strategy involved, and you are drafting early, you're drafting obviously at this time in May, June, or July for a regular season that begins the first week of September. There is strategy in padding for injuries and honestly just setting your lineups up for talent in the second half of the year, not just the first half. And that's when we have studies about rookies breaking out in the second half of the season, for example. Backup running backs getting opportunity. You can set yourself up for success that way rather than drafting all starters heavily. There are different running back strategies we'll talk about. But honestly, on DraftKings, really what you're trying to do is stick to a construction strategy. And so for your lineup, we suggest at Establish the Run, at least sticking with the blueprint of 3 quarterbacks, 5 running backs, 7 wide receivers, and 3 tight ends. That automatically sets, especially your onesie positions, quarterback and tight end, where you're typically starting just one player. That automatically sets you up to pad for injuries. Thus, if one of your elite players, let's say you draft Brock Bowers or Trey McBride early, you still most likely have 3 tight ends. So you have 2 tight ends to get you by for the rest of the season, even if Bowers or McBride were ruled out for the rest of the year. And so that's how, when you're drafting this early, you can at least begin the very beginning of setting yourself up for success to be ready for injuries.
And the other thing, just big picture, right, John, correct me if I'm wrong, is more so than season-long leagues where you're concerned with consistency of performance. Is it fair to say for best ball, you're going more for the guys that have upside and or you're not necessarily as concerned about consistent week in, week out performance? We can handle more variance and we want more games where they really pop and end up being one of the people that score for you.
Yes and no. Like season-long leagues, the last 2 to 4 rounds, you're really taking darts, you're taking wild shots, understanding that you're most likely going to cut those players in free agency. In best ball, because once you draft, you're done, there is no roster adjustment. Really, you don't want to take zeros at the back end of your roster. And so whereas I would draft someone like off the top of my head, let's say like the Texans' third string running back, the rookie Woody Marks they just drafted. Whereas I will take him in like a season-long league, understanding that after a month, if he doesn't get that opportunity behind Joe Mixon, I could just cut him and go pick him up later, battle for him in free agency with my fab. In best ball, if a third-string rookie running back doesn't get an opportunity, that's a 0. And most likely due to injuries over the course of a 17-game season, like you have to use every single body. And so you're trying to be a little bit wiser with your last-round picks, hoping they get on the field and they actually can provide usable scores. You're not just going for straight ceiling because a 0 is deadly to your lineup.
Interesting. Okay. Then I was a little bit off on that. Why don't we start with sort of your thoughts on the quarterback position?
And a majority of the time, we are preaching and established to run to draft 3 quarterbacks. Again, especially if you are drafting this time of year, and that's just a pad for injuries. Having said that, with 3 quarterbacks on DraftKings, it makes a lot of sense because, remember, on DraftKings, you also get the 4-point bonus for going over 300 yards. No other interface or format does that. And so we want to give ourselves more outs with that third player, not just for injury, but for that bonus, since the 4-point bonus can make a big difference. There is ways to go about it, though, when drafting 3 quarterbacks, because honestly, when we are drafting 3, we don't want to use our elite capital, like our top 6 picks, on a quarterback. And so we're not then typically, unfortunately, getting guys like Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, the list goes on, because those guys get drafted in the 3rd or 4th round. If we're taking 3 and really just trying to gives ourselves a third out for a bonus, then we don't mind waiting beyond that and instead stacking Caleb Williams, Brock Purdy, and Dak Prescott, for example. 3 fringe top 12 quarterbacks who really don't add much rushing juice, but they can still get the bonus weekly when all goes well for their offenses. And so that's the way I prefer to approach quarterback on DraftKings.
Interesting. So hoping that out of those 3, you'll get one solid performance every week, as opposed to, trying to get a high-end guy that really can carry the load or have huge performances, including using his legs.
Exactly. And then if you do want to happen to grab the draft falls where you do get one of those elite guys, Lamar, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Jaden Daniels, then at this time, because, again, we're drafting so early, I still suggest drafting 3 quarterbacks, but you can wait even longer. You can wait until the end and then draft like a starter we believe, if not for injuries, would play all 17 games. Someone like a Geno Smith or J.J. McCarthy. So that's waiting on your second quarterback, and then also grabbing a third player who could break out in the second half of the season. Someone like Jackson Dart, for example, who we don't believe will start the season behind Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, but will be due to the Giants' tough schedule. Warren Sharp is projecting one of the toughest schedule in the entire year. We believe Jackson Dart will be starting by week 8. And so I still want 3 quarterbacks, even if taking one of the elite ones, you were just then afforded to wait much longer for that third option.
Ooh, that's interesting about projecting when rookie quarterbacks would start, because there's a lot of belief that the Giants took Jackson Dart because of his legs and mobility. With that tough schedule, you would assume they'd be behind in a lot of games. He might really rack up some garbage time production potentially, John.
Oh, absolutely. Him now with the Seahawks basically declaring Jalen Milroe as their backup, one injury to Sam Darnold, that happens, and Jalen Milroe, who we already talked about, averaged 14 carries per game as a starter in college. He's under center. Daniel Jones, the Colts don't just give a backup quarterback $16 million guaranteed because he's not going to play. Daniel Jones is playing. And so guys like that, again, if you take an elite quarterback, you are then allowing yourself to take one of those options as your third player and hope they're under center in the second half of the year.
We're almost in June, which means it's almost beach time most weekends for your boy, which means it's yummy, yummy Smirnoff in my tummy. I've told you guys before, I drink it with Gatorade Zero or hydration drinks or Pedialyte. It's perfect. I'm hydrating while I'm drinking delicious Smirnoff vodka, the #1 vodka in the world and an official vodka partner of the NFL. And it's not expensive. It's not one of these crazy expensive vodkas out there. Grab a bottle of Smirnoff at your local retailer and head to Smirnoff.com to find recipes of delicious cocktails perfect for game day. Please drink responsibly. Smirnoff number 21 vodka, distilled from grain. It's 40% alcohol by volume. The Smirnoff Company, New York, New York. Please not share with anyone under legal drinking age. All right, let's move on then to the running back position, unless you have anything else to say on quarterback.
Nope, I think that's about it for quarterbacks.
Okay, then let's move on to the running back position, what the roster construction should look like. You mentioned not taking quarterbacks early. I'm assuming you are taking running backs early?
So this is where understanding the format on DraftKings comes into play, because we have every week your lineup has 2 flex spots and only 2 running back spots. And so, yes, we do like to try to come away with an anchor running back, a running back in the first 3 rounds, someone we consider an elite player. But since DraftKings, remember, is full PPR, you not only get a full point for every reception a player has, but you also get a bonus 5 points if they go over 100 yards. Then that means understanding the format is what's best here, and the format on DraftKings calls to draft wide receivers early and often. And so you can start. We still want you to start with a running back, but then most likely have at least 5 receivers, 6 receivers in the first 9 rounds is what we're going for. Because the way DraftKings works, it's more like everyone's home leagues, where running backs, for whatever reason, are incorrectly prioritized. In home leagues, that makes sense in your season-long league to stack running backs early and then pick apart wide receivers in the middle rounds. On DraftKings, though, since running backs tend to go early, we like taking one and then hammering wide receivers to get good values instead of trying to draft starting receivers from round 9 on. So we want you to draft 5 to 7 wide receivers most likely, if not 8 stacking with your quarterback, but definitely do it earlier than you normally would.
Okay, so I understand, but explain it to me. Why the receiver? Do you get a bonus for 100 yards receiving, but not a bonus for 100 yards rushing?
You do get a bonus for 100 yards rushing, but because running backs are if you draft on other formats that have best ball, for example, rookies and guys who can break out in the second half of the season are usually gone. They're prioritized arguably too early. But on DraftKings, because it's a different format, for whatever reason, I don't know why people draft this way on DraftKings specifically, but they do allow running backs that have a potential to break out in the second half of the season. Guys like you wouldn't think about. Jarquez Hunter, for example, the Rams' potential RB2. Raheem Mostert, who is the backup right behind Ashton Genty. These guys are actually valuable in best ball because they're one injury away from then getting touches and starting in the back half of the season. In season-long leagues, we can just go pick those guys up. In best ball, though, it's important we draft those players from like rounds 14 on. And whereas some formats, those kind of guys are not available, on DraftKings they are. And so that's why we like instead hammering wide receivers, and then you can pick apart those late running backs much later in the draft.
By the way, we will have not only best ball rankings, but also season-long rankings over the next couple months. So we'll go position, when you hear John mention Raheem Mostert, who you've heard of, Jarquez Hunter, who maybe you haven't, gosh, it kind of reminded me that you just saying that name reminded me of Jaquiz Rogers. Remember him?
Of course.
Jaquiz Rogers. That's so funny. That'd be a fun show at some point, John, where we just threw out random skill guy names that like pop in your head for whatever reason. But we will do the best ball rankings over the next month or so that you guys have a really good feel for where these guys stack up. All right, so then you take one running back, and then you take a bunch of receivers, and then you dive back into the running backs. Tell me about running back RB2 and 3 and 4 and 5 that you take on your team, John.
That's what we like to do, yes. One running back, then dive into receivers. Most of the time, you're going to leave your draft with 6 to 7 running backs, but you are instead going to be picking apart that probably 4th or 5th tier of running backs, the Tyler Algiers of the world, where they can step in and you can set yourself up for success due to the volatility of the position, since it's obviously the most often injured position on the field, given that they are taking the most hits. So at least in terms of fantasy. So yes, we like drafting instead the backup running backs and picking apart wide receivers, banking on wide receivers leading your flex for that extra PPR boost.
Got it. Okay, so I had written down earlier 3 quarterbacks, 5 running backs, 7 receivers, 3 tight ends. Now you just said 6 or 7 running backs. I want to make sure I understand.
There are 20 rounds, and so the blueprint I gave you is 18 picks. And the other 2 picks, you can tack on extra running back, wide receiver, tight ends. But I gave you 3 quarterbacks, 5, 3, 5, 7, 3 is what we say. That's the
That's
bill.
the basis,
Yes.
and then the other 2 is like floating.
Wide open, yes. But we make sure, at minimum, we want you to leave every draft with 3, 5, 7, 3, and then you have 2 extra picks to do with what you want, most likely not at quarterback, though.
The flex guys, as we move to receiver, do the flex guys typically end up... So there's... How many people are in the lineup again, John?
18.
No, I mean how many score for you? I'm sorry.
Starting lineup. So it's going to be 9, including a tight end. No, 11, including 2 flexes.
Okay, so... All right, so it's 2 running backs.
Doing this off the top of my head, yeah.
2 running backs, 3
9.
receivers.
9.
Okay,
And
2 running backs, 3 receivers.
tight end, 2 flex.
2 flex. Okay, do the flex usually end up being wide receivers or running backs?
So since it is a full PPR bonus, that's why we also don't mind adding a 4th tight end, or try to make sure everyone knows minimum 3 tight ends, because also tight ends can sneak into your flex on bad days. And so we don't mind having that 4th option. But most of the time, if you are drafting accordingly, your flexes are going to be strong wide receivers who get the 100-yard bonus.
Got it. Okay.
Plus
let's talk receivers.
And receivers still, remember, they're not like running backs where an injury happens and the receiver suddenly gets touches. Receivers still earn targets. Thus, we like making sure we have a lot of receivers because it's still hard to come by points. But the way DraftKings works, we can get a bunch of very good receivers since everyone is instead picking apart that dead zone of running backs, of running back veterans. Like, and season long, I will definitely not mind steering away from my draft to grab someone like a Kenneth Walker, DeAndre Swift, Alvin Kamara, the list goes on. But in best ball, especially on DraftKings, we can instead use those windows where everyone's picking apart running backs to draft better receivers. And so that's why we are then waiting to draft running backs. For wide receivers, though, how many you leave with a minimum of 7, it really just depends on when you spend those picks. And so if you are drafting early, like I mentioned, having 6 by the first 9 rounds, in that case, you're probably going to just end up with 7 anyhow. But if you end up like running backs fall in your draft room, and so when you instead pile on running backs and end up with like 5 strong ones to begin with, you're then most likely going to leave with 10 wide receivers, tacking on extras in the last rounds instead of running backs. But I will say probably you want to go with 7 to 10 in every draft.
7 to 10 receivers,
Yes.
including early and often.
Yes.
Okay. And they end up typically being your flex spots?
They do, yes. Wide receivers on DraftKings typically do. Again,
But it's automatic, right?
Yes, and even though...
So I was forgetting that for a second. It's automatic. It's not like you have to decide who goes into your flex.
No, it's the highest scorer, yeah. But given the volatility of running backs have higher ceilings. It's just harder to find those ceilings since running backs ultimately boils down to the touches you receive, and touches you receive then depends on your availability. And so wide receivers, if you can earn targets, you just earn targets. Players earn targets. But yes, 7 to 10 most likely is what we're going to leave every draft with on DraftKings.
All right, I got a couple minutes left here. I haven't really talked much about tight ends. You obviously referenced Bowers earlier, but where do the tight ends fit into this whole maze here?
Tight ends, again, because it's full PPR and bonus, tight ends can sneak their way into our flex spots. And so not only to pad for injuries, but to make sure we have extra starters that could come out of nowhere, we do like making sure we have a minimum of 3 tight ends. And again, much like we're approaching quarterback position, for tight end, you can still take a Bowers, McBride, George Kittle, and then just wait on your second and third tight end. You then let it go all the way down and tack on Hunter Henry and Jawan Johnson, for example, but you'd still have 3 options. And there are, when we get to our rankings, there are some guys who are floating around as late round values right now. I already mentioned Jawan Johnson, but on DraftKings, Isaiah Likely, Noah Fant, Dawson Knox, not Colby Parkinson, Theo Johnson also go pretty late. And so we can be aware that we can take those guys as very late round flyers, and they're still most likely on the field for a majority of their team snaps. But overall, yes, we want to leave with 3 understanding that multiple tight ends can be flexed just in case our wide receivers and our running backs happen to fail in any given week with the full PPR scoring.
It sounds like the way you describe the tight ends of getting a good one early and then waiting late sounds very similar to the running back conversation.
Yes, especially because, it's too early to talk about this draft strategy for season long, but I've already been doing season long drafts, just getting ahead of ADP and understanding where we're at right now in the market. And the way it's going to work is that Bowers and Kittle are available Bowers and McBride are available at the end of the first round. But after that, there is a wide gap to Kittle and then an even wider gap to Sam Laporta. And so it seems like if you don't get Bowers and McBride at the end of the first, second round, that turn area, you really just wait until the end for tight end. And so that's why prioritizing those guys at the end, if you want that position, is a strategy some will take.
This has been awesome. Gosh, John, it's unbelievable how much stuff you know. At Not J Daigle, there's a lot of guys like him. Not really, but there's at least a few others at EstablishTheRun.com. Adam Levitan, Evan Silva. Use that code FEAST to get 20% discount. We'll be diving into some of these best ball rankings before you know it. Other than that, I'm stuffed. We're done.
Thanks for tuning in to Fantasy Feast. Make sure to also check out the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Even Money, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.